Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Ask Adam Live. Ask is the acronym for Always Seek Knowledge. This and every other episode, I stress or hope that you ask, that you try to be a little bit more inquisitive about life, about yourself, and about others around you, that you understand some of the different facets of your life and others. And I think part of that is, well, not only does it create a more gentler world because you're experiencing and noting your experiences, but you also, well, you start to understand a little bit more about how others translate their experiences. This kind of dovetails into this episode, the 80/20 of influence. Or if you're ready, like I'm ready, let's begin the show. The small shifts that create massive impact. Most people try to be more persuasive, high performers to become more influential. Talking more doesn't equal impact. More content doesn't equal connection. And more effort doesn't equal results. See, the problem is most people focus on the wrong 80%. In my experience, speaking to people versus trying to control the room that I'm speaking to. In sales conversations, being salesy didn't increase my sales with real estate or insurance. It was more influencing decisions, understanding more of the client and what it was that they were looking for and wanted, and then showing them what was available. Leadership versus getting real participation. I know you've seen it like I have, and you often wonder. Some people say less and they get more results. Well, what I can promise to you in this episode is I'm going to break down the critical 20% behavior that creates 80% of your influence. I know you can't wait, so let's get started. Part one, what influence actually is. Influence is not talking louder. It is not having more information. It's also not being more aggressive. Influence. And this might rub the wrong way with social media, but I think that influencing needs to be better defined. Because you wearing a certain brand of shoes does not entice me one bit to go out and buy that pair of shoes. In fact, I'm more inclined to find a different pair of shoes because I don't want to wear the same shoes that you wear. Come on, shoe collectors, you're telling me this, right? You want your own style of shoe. Now, however, Michael Jordan and Nike have come out with this obnoxious amount of shoes that are out there, and everybody wants the this one and the that one, and they're all numbered. And this was, different design and whatnot. But I don't wear any of them because I don't want to wear what everyone else is wearing. I want to wear a unique shoe that might even spark a conversation where you go, "Hey, that is an interesting pair of footwear that you have on your feet. Where did you get them? Where can I find them? Are they comfortable?" To me, that sparks more of a conversation than, "Oh, you have the same pair of shoes I do." Nonetheless, influence is changing how someone thinks, feels, and acts. This is similar to what I've spoke about in other episodes relating to the neuroencoding that I teach is thought, feeling, action, and result. See, when you influence the thought pattern, you then influence the outcome. Most people try to influence at the action level. High performers probably aren't going to like that I say this, but their influence is at the belief level. Because when you believe in something, when I should say, when they have you believe in something, you're more inclined to act and to move forward. A part two of the 80-20 influence. Clarity is always over complexity. People will trust and act on something that they understand. If it's confusing, I can tell you it's immediately rejected. It's almost like the body's reaction to a really bad meal, maybe something unhealthy that you've eaten, whatever it might be, it's rejected. And some people will even if you ask, I remember a client, I said, yeah, it doesn't seem that you're really, and they couldn't explain, just that they didn't like it and they automatically rejected it. And I said, you know what? Let's just end on a good note that we've seen several properties, and let's reconvene at another time, another appointment, and we can reset some things, maybe readjust some expectations. But what I found was that when something gets rejected like that, you can't just say, "Oh, here, let's go somewhere else." No, you got to sort of let that really fade off, and it's a tough place to be. And that's where the complexity kills these conversions. That's why when you're putting together that what they call elevator pitch, or your position, mission statement, what it is that you do, you really have to have simple, compelling, what you do. And even to in a half a sentence, add that real life element to it. Let me give you an example. When you just generally say we offer integrated solutions, solutions to what? And that they're integrated. Well, if I don't know what they are, I don't know what they're integrating into. And if you offer solutions, what are the solutions? And it just offering an integrated solution doesn't really tell me that you understand possibly what my problem is. So see how that's, I know you're shaking your head going, man, you're talking in circles. Adam, come on now. And it's true. So now you're confused, and you most likely have rejected all of that last statement. But let's bring this back in a clean manner. What if I were to tell you that we help you increase revenue by 20% in 90 days? You know that there's an increase. Revenue is usually what most businesses live on. There's a measurement of the increase, and there's also, using the SMART method, is the element of time. So I pretty much have given you, in that simple statement, everything you need to know. Any questions? See how that makes a little bit more sense? Clarity over complexity. Number two, emotion before logic. People decide emotionally, then they justify it logically. I'm not the wizard. I'm not pulling the curtain back on this thing. It's a fact. I experienced it 150% in the insurance business. People purchase on emotion. They'll figure out how to pay the bill. They honestly don't care what it costs when it's something they truly need or want for whatever their reason is. I don't want to disclose too many reasons and people's personal information, but pretty much once, and some clients almost just sold themselves and said, "This is what I want. How can we get it?" And it moved forward because they were compelled to get something that they wanted. I will also mention that if a friend, family, or neighbor mentioned they had something, well, they wanted the same thing, if not better. And could they qualify for that policy? Many times, it was simply the storytelling. Individuals I had worked with before, I would share how they got a similar policy, how it helped for their particular instance. It wasn't me saying this is the best policy that the company offers. No, I explained simply what this policy does. They already determined it was the best. I didn't even have to say that. That's what created a little bit of the next step, which is the personal connection. If someone else has it, or it's something that someone else can get and they want to get it as well, that connection. And when you share those stories that someone else had something and that there was a positive result from having it, again, it wasn't me having the result. It certainly wasn't me selling something, all the features and benefits similar to real estate. It was the personal connection. Hey, what if this happened? Would you know what to do or how to manage it or how to handle it or which way to pivot? And once you kind of offer those scenarios, man, they were certainly interested in avoiding some of those outcomes, which takes me into the third of the shared struggle. When you let them know that someone had a similar experience, that someone had an issue that turned out not so well, but because they had this in place, things turned out slightly better. Well, they realized that it was real. And now it was something that they wanted to participate in. I also discovered is that influence increases when people feel understood. And many times I had to sit at a kitchen table and hear some very sad stories and try not to get too emotional and focus on, well, the main thing, which is what I was there to do. And honestly, what it is that they wanted, the outcome of having something that would alleviate the pain, provide a level of protection, and to know that their family was going to be safe. Once that was understood, again, it really didn't matter what the policy cost. It was how soon could we get it in place? So that level of security was now rested assurance. Which takes us into number three is certainty transfers. If you sound unsure, most likely the other party or your client customer is also going to feel unsure. So a few of the phrases you might want to remove from your language is stating things like, I think, maybe, it's kind of. You want to replace that with the certainty of, here's what works. This is how you do it. Certainty becomes contagious. And they're going to feel sure versus unsure. You speak from stories, from examples, as well as just sharing with them the certainty that what you have to offer from your value stack, if you will, is the best thing for them. And again, this isn't trickery, it's true salesman positioning. You understand what your client needs, what they want, determine from what you know what is best for them. And when you can share with them with that certainty of here's what works and explain to them why it works for them, putting them into that position, that's where the certainty is contagious. That's when they see it. Which takes us into number 4. Ask better questions. The most influential people talk less. However, they do ask. What's the biggest challenge right now? What would solving that do for you? What's holding you back? And then when you ask those direct questions, you be silent. I remember one of my mentors, he said, you be a geranium. And I remember laughing. I'm like, geraniums don't talk. And he said, exactly. Don't say a thing. Just sit there and let them speak. They will work it out. And if there is any speaking from you, most of the time it's followed by a long pause because you're waiting for them to finish. You're confirming that they're finished. And then you're going to inject, drum roll, please, because if they haven't answered the question, the words you speak are repeating the question. That's it. And go back to geranium activity to resume. And you wait. I know it sounds silly, but until you get an answer to that question, that simple question, what's the biggest challenge for you right now? And they may tell you half a dozen things and not really answer the question. And you go, wow, that really sounds like you have an interesting life. But is there a challenge you have right now? Is there a desire for this? Maybe if you had this, how do you see this solving the problem that you speak of? And I appreciate that we're talking today, but what's holding you back? Why haven't you done this before? Just being simple to ask that and wait and let them tell you exactly what they want. Again, this is not trickery, it's simplicity at its finest. Because these questions will guide thinking. And again, you ask the question, and if you've gotten everything but the answer, then you ask the question again because it still needs to guide the thinking. They're most likely not even thinking about the question, they're thinking about something else, which is what has your client or customer talking about something that's not answering the question. Sometimes you have to dig a little bit. So you may ask the question once, twice, rephrase it, but keep it tight. Maybe ask a different question. Okay, so it sounds like you have a lot of challenges. Would this solve any one of those? How do you see it solving that? And wait, because thinking drives decisions. Once they finally answered the question, it means they're thinking. Once they're thinking, it means they're now working towards a decision. And they've pretty much told you what the problem is, what the decision is that they're working on and working with. And now you can give them the this or that. There's two options. You can always throw in three, but at the end of the day, there's honestly just two options: to do something or to not do something. I know there's a little mathematical percentage that says most people pick middle of the road if you give them a high and a low and a middle. And they're like, well, the high is too expensive and the low is not going to help them feel secure or sure of the purchase or sure of the longevity or whatever it is. Nobody likes the low, and the high is usually out of reach. Again, this is just studying of neuroscience. It happens every time, and they'll always go to the middle. So it's either going to do it, not going to do it, is pretty much the only two decisions that will happen at that decision tree. There is, I'll think about it, but that goes right next to not going to do it. That takes us into number 5. You want to align before you redirect. Now, I want to share with you that we're going into some elite level of influence. So if you're not quite comfortable with this, it's okay. But this is the big game that you want to practice for, is this elite level of influence. And you want to stay away from phrases like "you're wrong" and express, "I understand why you see that. See it that way." And then shift. And this mirrors to them that, well, you understand what they're saying, but here's the option. I understand how you might feel this way, but this is what we can get today. Will that change tomorrow? Most likely not. You could give them some hope, but at the end of the day, it's still going to remain the same, especially with insurance. If I can sidestep for a moment, a lot of it is based on health relation with the client. So if you come to the table with health problems, the odds of you eating healthy, working out, losing weight, and getting off of all your meds isn't necessarily going to change that policy that you've already put in place, because it's based on the initial results, which are you're unhealthy, you're taking medication, you're doing this. Those are the statistics. They're going to base it on that all day long. Even what's the term that they use? The pre having something before getting the policy. They statistically know that once you almost had something, even though you get rid of the weight and get rid of the medications and you're having a much healthier lifestyle, the odds are you're still leaning closer to their statistical measurements than you defying their statistical measurements. And so they're going to rate you accordingly. So you can offer some level of hope. Well, yeah, things can be reconsidered, but I can tell you at the end of the day, from almost all certainty, the odds of getting that readjusted is not going to happen. So it is what it is. Let's move forward. You need this product, you would like this product, or you don't. Just that simple. But I understand you see it that way, and then shift to the reality of the situation, it mirrors a high level. And it also kind of puts it in the framework of enter their world, then redirect. So that it gives clarity that they feel and know you understand them, you're on their side, but the game is the game. The rules are the rules. You're just there with them, kind of under the same scrutiny. Hey, I'd really like to do this for you. Not sure underwriting is going to allow it, but we can try. I already know that underwriting is going to argue about it, but you give a little hope. Let's give it a try. Let's see what they say. And I'm also clear that, hey, if they come back with this, you're still okay. You're okay with these parameters. Yeah, but can we ask? Sure, we can ask. Again, I already know the answer, but I was getting in line with them to at least offer that fair chance. This takes us into number 6, where I demonstrated structure. And again, that created trust. See, when I shared with them the framework, it signaled authority. Example. Since we're on insurance in this particular episode, when I would sit down with a client and or maybe the initial first or second phone call, I would say, hey, I'm going to stop by your house. Here's the 3 steps. Talk about some of your information, stop by your house, we review the information, what I've come up with. I will share with you some options. We will pick one of those 3 options, go through this process, and then you'll have this. Or one of the steps was creating the 5 pillars of qualification, that it wasn't me saying yes or no. It was this, and this helps define that, plus this and this helps narrow it down. Just to segue a little bit, I think in real estate was I set up a 90-day plan. Most of my listings were for 90 days because, quite frankly, if I couldn't sell your property in 90 days, I, first of all, wasn't being honest with you. Second of all, I was probably going away from some of the things I felt were true, such as the listing price, such as the market. If I wasn't telling you exactly what the market was here with that utmost certainty of where it was going to go or where it's been, then yeah, we were going to spend some time on the market. Most of the time it was overpriced or just a difficult location. And yeah, by then the numbers just weren't penciling out. It became a difficult pillar in business to have that. But I shared with people, here's the 90-day plan. Here's what we're going to do. This, and this. And what I've found with that is that people trust the structure because it reduced the uncertainty. When you come with a plan, they know that it's not the first time, nor will it be the last time. And it does create that level of assurance that you have a plan and that you're doing the same old same. And that's okay, because that is where your client and customer is confident with you that they don't see themselves as just another cog in the wheel, but that they're part of this process, if you will. Which takes us into part 3, and this is where most people fail. Yeah, that was on purpose. They overtalk. But this is a podcast, and it's about explaining and asking questions to you and creating and provoking thought. And because, unlike dealing with a client or customer where I understand everything about them or a good part of them, that I'm able to direct it a little bit more narrow in my conversations. This is a very broad conversation. So I feel and find that I have to have the conversation almost in 3 different ways each time that I'm speaking. So yes, over talking is part of each one of the episodes, as well as over explaining. But when you're with the client in the business that you're focused in, no need to over talk. Keep it simple. No need to over explain. It is what it is. The facts are the facts. The policy is the policy. You either want this one or that one. There's there's two to choose from. We're either going to get one or we're not. You can also try to impress someone. I never found that I had to do that because the facts were the facts. You either wanted to work with me or you didn't. And sometimes a client would say, hey, I don't think we're a good fit. And quite frankly, I would agree with them. They reached that conclusion faster in the sentence than I did, or it was going to be somewhere in my next dialogue and they just spit it out faster. But it was usually a general conclusion pretty quick on that maybe it wasn't a good fit. And sometimes it would be even before the meeting, like the phone call. Hey, I'm looking to do this, and can you do that for me? And I would just be upfront to say that is almost impossible. And if you could find someone who can meet all of your needs and do all of that within that unreasonable amount of time, more power to you. They're a much better agent than I am. And I knew that it was impossible and they were going to exhaust themselves for the task at hand. So don't try to impress. The facts are the facts. The other thing is to push instead of guide. If you don't, one of the good examples I remember always hearing was the doctor's prognosis. The doctor would have you conduct several tests with his staff, review the information. This may take several visits. We've all participated in this exercise, at which point any given doctor would then prescribe a solution or guide you through the process. But it was never a one and done, happen on the first visit. It's a process. Keep in mind, influence is not pressure, it's precision. Let me repeat that. Influence is not pressure, it's precision. I remember I was working with a client and I kept asking what it was, what's the outcome? What is it that you want to see at the end to know this is a win? And they kind of kept dancing around and really couldn't get to it. And I remember sharing with them that what I do is help professionals who feel stuck rebuild clarity and execute a focused 90-day reset so they can stop drifting and start moving. And I remember they kind of looked at me and said, aren't you a coach and you help me with personal development? And I said, well, that sounds entertaining, but no, that's not what I do. I help professionals who feel stuck rebuild clarity and execute a focused 90-day reset so they can stop drifting and start moving. Once they heard it that way, there was a different influence. They almost looked at me. They almost looked at me differently. Like literally, I changed when I was the same person. But in their mind and their perception was, oh, you're a coach with personal development, and just put that together. So when you're influencing your client or customer, that person, you need to be clear about what it is that you're doing. As I mentioned at the beginning, what it is that you do, be specific, so that they know who they're working with and the outcome they're going to receive. And when you state this up front, you're sure not to have that misunderstanding, as I did with this particular individual. Now, again, we're all learning. We all understood. I might have, well, yeah, I was probably guilty because I kind of assumed at that certain point, I was like, well, you got to know who I am. When you go through all of the information about me, whether it's on the website, influence page, all of the stuff that goes on, it's like, how did you miss that? But they did. So now I'm very clear about being upfront immediately to make that restatement to individuals, so they know who they're dealing with and the influence they can expect. Let's wrap this up with some common influence killers. Remember, talking too much, be a geranium. The lack of clarity, know your business and be specific in how you speak about it. Your delivery is everything. Short, sweet, to the point. Don't butter it up with colorful language or to help make it sound flowery or light and fluffy. It is what it is. You got to have structure. And the fifth is trying to please everyone. Remember, like I said, as soon as I was on the phone with that particular client that wanted this, this, and this, I already knew can't please everyone. We'll just nip this in the bud and say, yep, I'm not the person for you. Best of luck. Remember, in closing, influence isn't about saying more, it's about saying what matters in the way that moves people. I hope that you have found this episode as helpful as I have sharing it with you. I want you to take these notes and this experience to better your life and the things that you do. Now, let us all go out and make it a great day.